Joining us right now, though, via Zoom chat is our a friend and attorney of the show, Davis Younts, and he represents many members of the military fighting for their religious liberty and their rights, to include his own. And we're grateful to have him back on the program this morning. Good morning to you, Davis Younts.
Hey, good morning, brothers. Good to talk to you.
Praise be to God. It's good to see you. And every time I see you, that beard is looking more and more majestic. It's just so good. So good. You got good genetics there, Mr. Younts. Let's talk about this big news that came out last week. An Ohio judge blocked a temporary moratorium on the vax mandate for Air Force personnel. Tell us about this.
Yeah, this is huge. It's very similar to what Judge O'Connor did in the Texas case involving the Navy. So Judge McFarland in Ohio has issued a temporary restraining order which prevents the Air Force from disciplining, taking adverse action against, or discharging members of the United States Air Force who submitted a religious accommodation. And we can talk a little bit more about the details and kind of the parameters of that. But it's huge because it puts a hard stop to the enforcement of the vaccine mandate for all of those who are fighting it because of their faith, based on their religious faith. So it's huge. It's temporary. It's in place for 14 days. The judge gave the Department of Defense, Department of Justice 7 days to respond. But what's encouraging to all of us is this judge, Judge McFarland, heavily quoted the language that Judge O'Connor used, the same principles, the same ideas that Judge O'Connor used in the Texas case. That injunction went from a temporary restraining order to a permanent injunction. We believe and hope the same thing will happen here because we don't see anything that the Air Force could say, the Department of Justice could say in response to this temporary restraining order that would change Judge McFarland's mind at this point.
Well, I've heard reports that there's some 700 plus pilots. I don't know if they're all in the Air Force or maybe they're spread throughout the branches that are all facing a discharge over this issue. What would that do to our capability to own the skies under a serious conflict?
Absolutely terrifying when you think about military readiness and you just think about the number of people that we're talking about and you're talking about the skill sets. You know, when you think about my brother's a Navy pilot, he flies Hornets off a carrier. It takes 7 years to go from officer training in the Navy to being a truly combat ready pilot. And it's a similar timeline for the Air Force. I mean, you can fly the plane, but to actually have the skill sets you need to be effective, to lead missions in combat, you're looking at a 7-year window. So in the midst of Christians being discharged last week, there was a story that came out on Breitbart. 260,000 members of the United States military were not in compliance with the vaccine mandate. That's DOD's own numbers that they're reporting to Congress. 260,000. So you take 700 pilots, you take a significant percentage of Navy SEALs, you take a significant percentage of Coast Guard rescue divers. I mean, just the concerns that I have, that many of my clients have over the military readiness issue is huge.
Yeah, especially at a time when it seems like there's a lot of there's a heating up in the Pacific, China kind of constantly moving around, building bases and that sort of thing. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah. Would we own the skies in Taiwan? Would we even bother to try is the next question. And there was, of course, 40,000 plus National Guard troops that are no longer going to be paid.
That's right. And so, again, understanding how the National Guard works is critical. So National Guard members, they drill every month. So you show up every month, 1 week in a month, 2 weeks in the summer, and you prepare to be ready to deploy. You prepare for these missions. So that's part of what the National Guard does. And so what the federal government, DOD policy, the Army is pushing is not allowing anyone who hasn't been fully vaccinated to show up for drill. So again, when you think in terms of my client's concerns about readiness, that's a huge deal because the National Guard is a key part of our force. It's a part of our infrastructure. It's how we plus up and get ready to deploy. And if they're not able to come and drill and prepare and do that critical training, their skill sets are going to quickly lapse. Equipment's going to fall into disrepair. So huge concern with my clients.
I mean, the pilots alone really are pretty scary, just considering how much air power plays a role in all of conflict management for the U.S. military. So that's going to have huge ramifications. I guess the clear winner in that scenario is the airline carriers who are so desperate for pilots at this point. They would love to have 700 pilots come into the job sector, and they could, make the flights steady again, I suppose. But let me ask you a question. Do you believe, or is there a general feeling here that the military is simply leveraging this opportunity to target Christians among the ranks?
So I hesitated to say things like this. I've hesitated to think that because I have served myself for almost 20 years. But the bottom line is the numbers, the statistics, and what's happening, the way Christians are being treated right now, I don't think there's any other conclusion that my clients can reach. This does feel like a purge. I mean, just looking at what the judge did in the Ohio case, less than 1% of those that have submitted a religious accommodation request as it relates to the vaccine have even gotten any kind of a fair review. The only people that have gotten approved are people that already have an approved separation date. So you have multiple federal judges across the country looking at this and going, this is political theater. This is a ruse. The military is not taking these religious accommodation requests seriously. So as Christians, as people of faith, how do we react to that? When there's a religious accommodation process in place, it's been in place for years. I mean, again, we joke about my beard. I've said this before to you. If I said I was a neo-pagan Norse Viking and that was my religious faith and I needed a beard waiver, I would get it in the DOD today. But If I'm a conservative Catholic, if I'm a conservative Orthodox Christian, and I say, I can't take your experimental medical treatment because it's tied to the abortion, to the murder of children, then there's no place for me in the military today. If I have a biblical view of marriage, there's no place for me in the military today. So absolutely, the cultural battles we see in society, the military reflects that. And it does feel to many of my clients like that's precisely what's going on here.
I mean, most of the world has already moved on past the pandemic, and it's become really not a real issue anymore, although there's talk of a new strain, but still the world seems to have moved on beyond this. But the military's focused on this myopically. They're still requiring a vaccination when the infection rates are at all-time lows. How else do you interpret all of this? I mean, the context seems to be missing for a mandate at this point.
And absolutely, still ignoring natural immunity. And then you just see absurd things happening. I have a client who was a Navy pilot. He volunteered to leave early because of this mandate. They let him out, and now he's working for a contractor. And you know what he does with that contractor? He flies fighter jets for a contractor and works with the Navy, flying fighter jets for a contractor. So, I mean, these policies have consequences. It feels very, very political, and it does not make scientific or medical sense at this point.
He probably makes more money under those conditions.
He does.
So you're saying I can still fly Navy planes and make more money? Deal. Let's do this thing.
Right. And sit right next to and work every day with the same uniform wearing Navy pilots that I was before, but because I'm wearing a different uniform, now I can do it, and we're safe.
And without having to do the sit-ups or the run. Yeah, it's great. It's a good deal if you can get it. Praise be to God. But, okay, so I also think back of stories that are older now, many years old, of, like, for instance, the U.S. Air Force Academy accepting, witchcraft as an official religious group. And it seems like the movement towards the condition that we're under now in our military has been brewing for some time. And if they can eject tens of thousands of Christians out of the military, we're not going to see any improvements in the current climate and culture of the military. It's only going to get worse. And without that ethic, without that moral code, I see even more abuse in the future. How do you see it?
Yeah, I mean, that's a concern that I have. Again, a concern my clients have. Our military is based on a constitutional footing, right? The idea that our military officers swear an oath to support and defend the Constitution. You know that, you serve. But just as our founding fathers were concerned, hey, if we don't have a moral basis, if we don't have a biblical understanding as a foundation, we drift. And how do we keep a republic in that setting? So it's a huge concern. That's why we need to continue to push. Just simply getting people out, people being allowed to leave isn't enough. To most of my clients, it's a concern that I have. I think this battle, this fight for the heart and soul of the military is going to continue because it's critically important. I mean, it's absolutely critical.
And I know some guys that go to our church, they're getting ready to go to the military, and I just shake my head to say, how is it that you're only going to be putting yourself through a very difficult future of possibly being fired and separated from the military and having that on your record because of what they're going to force you to do? I don't understand how we are continuing to want to support a culture in which we send our children to this woke ideology unless something drastically changes. How would you address that with parents?
I have been urging extreme caution to a lot of parents. I mean, for the last really year and a half, 2 years, for the first time in my life, I've been discouraging young men from joining the military because of that concern. So I get calls from parents every day. We have that conversation every day. And so I ask, why are you doing this? What are your goals? But you're seeing that it's not just those anecdotal stories. Recruiting is down. The numbers are incredible when you look at recruiting across the services. So all of these policies are having a huge impact, and the normal sort of patriotic, faith-based folks are not joining the military like they used to.
It would require a massive change. You'd have to probably not just the Department of Defense as far as the secretary goes. You'd have to have generals being changed out in ideology. And we just don't see that happening anytime soon. Even under a new administration, that would be incredibly difficult to pull off, I imagine.
It would take a lot of time. It's going to take a lot of time and structural change and just a lot of prayer.
Last question with our Davis Younts. This judge in Ohio who blocked temporarily this vax mandate, that affects you personally. Your 19 and a half years of service for our country, you may or may not make retirement at this point. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I submitted a religious accommodation request. It was denied. I submitted an appeal. That was denied on the 30th of June. So that put me into a window where I had to, I wasn't even eligible to apply for retirement under the normal process because they've shortened the window. So I was waiting myself for potentially adverse action or to be put in a no points, no pay status once this decision came down. So not just many of my clients, this decision impacted me personally, and should help, I believe, get me to 20 years.
Well, we pray that you do. You deserve it. You've earned it. Thank you for your service. Well, praise be to God. R. Davis Younts, we appreciate your insight into this. We look forward to having you back soon. Check them out online at younts.law.com. That's YOUNTS, younts.law.com. R. Davis Younts, God bless you. God love you, brother. Have a great day.
God bless you.